Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to show you guys. This is the Kershaw Bel-Air XL. This is a knife that is truly much larger than the standard variation. Not to the point where it's absolutely massive, but it's enough larger that people who were not tempted by this guy because of its size might be tempted by this guy. I've been carrying this knife for about 5 days now, and I'll tell you right here at the beginning, I really like it, especially considering it is an actual US made knife with really good tolerances, really good materials for a completely reasonable price. This is not a combination of things that we get to see in 2025. We're usually missing one or multiple elements, or if you're Benchmade, you're missing all of those elements except for being made in the United States. In my opinion, Kershaw is making essentially Benchmade level quality knives. In fact, in a lot of cases, better. But they're charging, what in this case, like half the price of what we would typically see. And I'm using Benchmade as an example here because their prices are just completely and totally outrageous, but they are not the only US company guilty of this, right? Some more or less. There's still some really good players out there like Hogue and ProTech and a number of others. Definitely not coming down on all US companies, but Kershaw is proof that this can be done for a price tag that is reasonable. Obviously, we change the scales to something like titanium and we start doing more complicated machining and inlay work, well, then the price is going to go up. But with a really good blade steel and totally acceptable handle and frame materials, the price for a US knife can absolutely be reasonable, and these knives are proof of that. I will link the Bel-Air XL down in the description. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to Kai USA for supplying this knife to me for review. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Let's go ahead and measure it. I'm going to leave the regular size Bel-Air out here, which is, by the way, an exceptional knife. I think many of you are already familiar with it. Yeah, pick that one up if if this one seems too big. This one's coming in at a totally reasonable 7 3/4 inches. So not a big, not an XL knife. I think a lot of people are going to look at that XL and assume that's going to be like a 9-inch pocket sword. No, not at all. Still totally within the realm of reasonable here. 7 3/4 inches. Blade length is not quite 3.5. I about said 3.5. It's about 3.4, maybe 3.45. Cutting edge is 3 1/4. So obviously up against the smaller Bel-Air here, which if you don't know, I'll go ahead and measure it. This guy is coming in at about 7 1/8 with a blade length of about 3.2 and a cutting edge of just shy of 3 inches. So enough of a difference there that this is going to come down to, it's pure preference. This knife is not too small for me. I actually really enjoy the Bel-Air if you've not watched my original review on that. But between the two, for me, I'm going to choose the one that's slightly larger, but this one I can still I wear an XL glove. I don't have a massive hand of I'd say a full-size adult male hand. I can still get a full grip on this guy if I want to, but the grip on this one is just a little bit more comfortable for me. Let's put it up against some other knives, some other common knives. Any custom scales in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against the 8010 and my own Excalibur, you can see here that these are big knives. These are 8.5-inch knives, so this guy looks a little smaller, but not that much. It's still definitely a knife that is very, very close to what I would call full size. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. I would say it's kind of right in between. It does have about the exact same amount of cutting edge as the PM2. And here's something that I find really interesting. While the PM2 does prioritize ergonomic lines over blade length, the amount of usable ergonomic space and the amount of usable cutting edge are actually the same. Nobody's really putting their finger down here, so if we cut that off and then you look at the total amount of ergonomic space, There's a little more curvature on the Spyderco PM2, and you could make an argument that the lock-in on the PM2 is probably going to be a little bit better, but overall you have essentially the same amount of grip room and the same amount of cutting edge for a knife that is substantially more compact. I love the PM2. I love the deployment, and the look's even kind of grown on me. It's like it's so ugly that I kind of like it, but it's kind of funny, you know, looking at that. Doesn't necessarily make it universally better. It's just an interesting thing to observe, I guess. Or maybe it's not interesting. You can tell me. Finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. And actually, I'm going to bring out, I think, the Bug Out. So here we have, I mean, it's no secret. Like, I mean, Kershaw, when they created the Bel-Air, it was certainly to, you know, release a knife in the same neighborhood as the Bug Out, because the Bug Out became ridiculously popular for being lightweight and compact, and basically an incredibly aesthetic, safe design, standard ergonomic lines, very straight, and standard drop point blade. So we have pretty much every company now making their own version of that knife. The Hogue Deca, and then of course, like, you know, you have your much less expensive versions like, I guess maybe it's not going to be out here. Oh yeah, here it is, the Miguron version. This is a Chinese knife, so this is going to cost way less, right? But when we're talking about actual U.S. competition, I don't have them all out here, but these are the big competitors. The Hogue Deca, I also think that that's an incredible knife with an incredible price tag. And then you have the Bug Out, which is the cheapest version they have is still like $180 for S30. I like S30V, by the way. S30V and injection mold plastic, and if you want anything better than that, you have to pay substantially more. I made a joke earlier, said it was double. It's not double, but it is a lot more for nothing extra. I can tell you that a G10 and MagnaCut Bug Out would have basically a price tag where seeing it would be the equivalent of being hit with a canoe paddle that had a landmine attached to the end of it. That's about the emotional response to seeing Benchmade's price tags on a lot of this stuff. So, this is a very, it's a Bug Out size knife. It's actually a little bit bigger and a little bit more, taller and more robust. It's not incredibly thick compared to the standard Bug Out or even the standard, Bel-Air. These are aftermarket scales, but they're very close to the standard scales of the Bug Out. So you can see that it's really not, it's just a little bit more robust this way. Let's do carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3 and the Spyderco PM2. So this is a very easy knife to carry in terms of the size. I will point out this version of it has some fairly aggressive peel ply texturing. The pocket clip is directly on top of that texturing, has some decent tension on it, but this will shred your pocket a little bit. I don't think it's too much of a problem right now because if it's not your, it's not your preference of texture. They will undoubtedly release like every freaking version of this thing that you can. There'll be a Fruity Pebbles version of this knife pretty quick. So if you want to hold out for something a little smoother, I'll just, the texturing on this is not the most aggressive I've ever felt. But it is fairly aggressive. It's a little bit of a pocket shredder. Outside of that, though, very, very good carry experience. Essentially exactly what I would expect. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of blade stock thickness here. The blade stock thickness on this guy, let me switch that out to inches. There we go. Probably 110. No, it's thicker than I thought. It's 119 thousandths. So versus the standard one, is it thicker or is it the same? Did they actually go thicker? They did. So on this guy, I can't say I noticed this cutting at all. Maybe the blade is tall enough that there's a little bit more of a taper or a little more room to drop down to the cutting edge. This guy is actually quite a bit. It's still not thick. It's nowhere near what I'd consider thick. If I always consider the median like 130 thousandths, so we're at 119. It's still on the thinner side, and it's fully flat ground blade, so the end result is a pretty thin edge, but it is definitely thicker than the standard Bel-Air. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I believe we have a T8 pivot and T6 hardware, which is one of the only things that I'm going to complain about here. So yeah, we have a T8 there, and then I'm not even going to get the other one out. We have T6. They do a great job of minimizing the total number of screws, right? For example, we have a pivot, 2 body screws, and then your pocket, not even, because we have the pocket clip screws. Oh wait, there is another screw underneath there, I'm sorry. Whereas Benchmade has a screw for the stop pin, a screw for the cartridge liner, and then 2 additional screws for the body, and then for the pocket clip, which is ridiculous, considering it's unnecessary, and you're also having to do all that before you get in to mess with the Omega springs and the crossbar lock if you're trying to take the entire knife apart, and that's not a fun process. If you've never done it before, it's far from impossible, but as long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Let's see here. We did the hardware check. Did we weigh it? I don't think we weighed it. Let's go ahead and do that. Now, the version of the Bel-Air that I have here is a carbon fiber one. It shouldn't be too much different than your standard aluminum or micarta Bel-Air, whatever the original is. But this version here, the XL, comes in at 3 ounces, which is really good considering it's a 3.4 inch blade. So the ratios there are fantastic. The standard version of this knife only weighs 0.4 ounces less, roughly. You could say half an ounce less with the variation there. So not much. I think that the ratios are excellent. That's right on the line for what I would consider to be ultra lightweight. So for me, that's just about as light as I want it to be anyway. Let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes here. This is pretty much exactly what you think it is. It is an ergonomic, lightweight, compact, efficient EDC cutting tool. We have, I don't know what we want to call this blade shape, modified sheep's reverse tant, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. The tip of the blade is more down than up in a traditional drop point blade. And I like this because I like to be able to do draw cuts. Not everybody needs that, but if you work or do things with a pocket knife that involve shaping cuts or little precision, things like that, I do that a lot. But I know a lot of people don't. But if you like that, this is the type of blade shape that I really like. In fact, this is about as optimized as it gets from my day to day. I don't need this much blade. I just like to have a full-size pocket knife right on that, just in case I'm going to do something where I need to have a full grip on the knife, which is very rare, but just in case I like to have that. It's just what I'm comfortable with. Thumb studs, I wish that they were domed on top, but they're not, and they are still plenty comfortable. This is a crossbar lock. Tension on the lock is, I would say, maybe like medium, but favoring slightly on the heavy side. It's definitely not a heavy tension crossbar lock, but it's fine. A lot of people are going to point out this is great, this is cool, it's awesome that they are tackling this area and delivering a great price tag and great quality, all of that. But it's still a crossbar lock, and at the end of the day, those are really boring, and we really we would prefer a different locking system, right? There's so many other amazing locking systems that are able to be utilized, and companies seem to be ignoring this in favor of your, incredibly oversaturated crossbar locks, button locks, things like that. And I would agree with you. That's the type of thing that could take this knife from great to legendary. If some sort of compression lock or button operated compression lock or some sort of super lock spine operated system that does not utilize Omega springs. A lot of times the complaints that people have with Omega springs are on incredibly inexpensive knives, or as I've come to find out here lately, there are issues with counterfeits, and people don't even realize that the knives that they have in their hands are counterfeits. We have a lot of issues with people buying authentic Benchmade knives only to return a counterfeit that they bought from TikTok or wherever in the box. And visually, they are so close. Obviously, in terms of quality, they're not the same thing, especially when it's a really low quality counterfeit. But visually, they look the same. So when they get checked back in, they go back up for sale. And it's not just Blade HQ and larger retailers that have had issues with this. There's a lot of retailers that I've spoken with that have reported people try to do this a lot. And so sometimes, not always, but sometimes what ends up happening is people buy knives and they end up with really crappy counterfeits. And those counterfeits obviously have very, very low quality omega springs that can snap. Now, this is not a majority of the time situation. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of different variables involved with omega springs breaking. Obviously, it is possible to purchase a authentic US made knife from a company like Benchmade or others that have, higher quality omega springs, and they break day one just because who knows how it was stored, what the knife came in contact with from, when it was manufactured to, all the way up to the point where it's on the shelves at whatever retailer. Obviously that can happen. And on the other side of that, the knife could go 20 years and never have an issue. I personally have never broken an omega spring. And people will be quick to say, well, that's because you don't really use your knives. I mean, not as hard as some, like if you mean like I don't go out in the forest and find a mud puddle and jump in it and stab my knife into the ground, no, I don't do anything like that. I'm just using an extreme situation there, right? But casually using the knives down here every single day for size comparisons, the Hogue Deca and the Ritter RSK MK1G2 and the Benchmade Bug Out. Each one of these knives gets flipped out at least once for a size comparison. And while they're not in an environment that would cause any sort of like corrosion or anything like that, any weakening element to the crossbar lock, they certainly are getting a workout. So if you consider the total number of uploads I have or the total number of reviews, they've been flipped out a lot. I've never actually had an issue. So I still think, though, even with the most optimal circumstances, because we're getting into the weeds of this, I think that omega springs represent an unnecessary weakness in a knife lock. I think that there are better systems, and I think that it's time that companies start to move forward with different systems. As time goes on, people are going to become increasingly bored with these locking systems, and newer systems would motivate. I mean, like for me, a different locking system on a bunch of awesome knives right now that are just boring with the crossbar lock, it would definitely motivate me to, make a purchase there. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the crossbar lock. I think that it's fine. It's been proven to be strong, and Kershaw does a really good job with it. In fact, if I'm being fair, as far as failures that I hear about with crossbar locking knives, it's pretty rare that I see anything in my comments about someone's Kershaw crossbar lock failing or an omega spring breaking. Yes, it's very easy to replace the omega springs. And I'm sure that Kershaw would, if you had a warranty claim and if they found it to be, a situation where they need to send you another one, then I'm sure they would. Yeah, I think that Kershaw does a fine job. Sorry, this is a long-winded way of saying Kershaw does a fine job with the crossbar lock, and I think it's plenty dependable, and I think you'll be just fine. But it's still a pretty boring lock, and I think that a knife like this would be made absolutely legendary with a different locking system. So anyways, ergonomically, very good. We have jimping here that complements the index finger position very well. You can choke up kind of here. I'm not going to tell you that I think it's comfortable, but you can choke up there a little bit. All of the edges here are knocked down, so really the only part it's not uncomfortable, it's just heavy texturing right here with this peel ply. We do have mounting positions for both right and left-handed people, which is great because the crossbar lock is an ambidextrous locking system, so it wouldn't make sense to have anything else. The jimping is great. I wish it extended a little bit further, but it is great. We have a fully flat ground MagnaCut blade. And what is Kershaw hitting their MagnaCut at? Community reports say 62 to 64, and I think Kershaw pretty much straight up says that. That's excellent. That's optimal. We have very good edge retention and incredible toughness balancing out the edge retention. And then we have exceptional corrosion resistance. MagnaCut, yes, it's on everything. I get it. But it really is an exceptional steel. It's really, really great. I don't really use anything consistently enough to the point where I'm like, oh my gosh, if I'm wearing down a blade, it means like somebody like me who uses a knife incredibly casually, if I'm able to wear it down, it's either an incredibly low quality steel or it's a steel with an incredibly low quality heat treatment. There was a company, not to get sidetracked again, but there was a company who sent a knife in, and that company was Sativian, I think. And I noticed that the M390 blade on that knife dulled within a day of casual use. And that was a great example of see you later, don't send me any more stuff. So never had that experience with Kershaw. Between the geometry, the materials used, and the heat treatment, it's really, really good. And this is just an excellent blade shape. Minimal billboarding, Kershaw on one side, and then we have, I don't know if I'd call it minimal. This is it's a lot, right? I think that could be made smaller, but it's not hurting anything. The little logo here just represents in-house design. There's no collaborative designer involved. It says MagnaCut and Kai USA. These are legitimately made in the United States. This confuses a lot of people, especially new people, because they say, oh, I've seen China on my Kershaw knives. All Kershaw knives must be made in China. These clearly are manufactured in China, and then they're sent over to the U.S. for assembly. You're thinking of Cobra Tech. They actually do that. Kershaw does not. They have some of their knives are made in China. They're usually the really inexpensive ones that you might see at Walmart. But they do carry some American models at Walmart. And then they have a whole bunch of knives that they make right here in the USA. They manufacture them, they assemble them, all the finish work, the heat treatment, stuff like that. And then there's a couple of small parts that are outsourced. But yeah, these are legitimately made in the United States, manufactured in the United States. So very cool. That's pretty much it. As you know, if I'm being honest, like the special thing about this knife is not like, oh my gosh, wow, ergonomic profile and great cutting, geometry and great blade material. Like this is, anybody can do that. Anybody. It's not special. What's special here is the fact that they're doing it in the USA, executing with incredible quality, hitting those numbers for the price. The price is what makes this so great compared to its real competition. Not its Chinese competition, its real US competition. Pocket clips, a good pocket clips, just a little bit stiff, lanyard hole. Got a couple of standoffs back here. This does run on bearings, I'm sure you could tell, right? Stop pin located in its traditional position. Solid lockup. We have no stick, no blade play, no pivot lash. Smooth and consistent here. Crossbar lock creates the detent, feels good. I have not had to adjust this, it stayed center. Basically everything you would expect. How much is this knife? The standard Bel-Air comes in, not this version. This version's more expensive, this because it's carbon fiber. But the standard version of this knife comes in at $159. Yes, I know that occasionally, like in various corners of the internet, you can find these things for a little bit less, right? But I'm talking consistent retail pricing, $159. So how much is the big boy? $169 on websites like Blade HQ. That is a very, very reasonable price tag. Very. 10 years ago, like 8 to 10 years ago, I was happy to pay that for the equivalent Spyderco knife, right? Now, Spyderco doesn't do that anymore. They will charge you substantially more, but I don't think they need to. I think they can totally charge about the same. I think this is completely reasonable. MagnaCut, great heat treatment, great geometry, great fit and finish, great execution, great ergonomics. It's very compact, lightweight, just a good pocket knife. But the price is what makes it special, not any of the other elements, because that's easy to execute. What makes it excellent is the price tag, and it's enough cheaper versus its competition that it's not a trivial matter. I mean, we're talking like, against some of its more reasonable competition, we're talking, I'd say $20 less in a lot of cases. I think the base version of the Deca is pretty close to this, right? Hogue is another great company. They do a great job. But versus some of the mid-range to the more extreme price competition, I mean, they're 40, 50, maybe $60 less in some cases. Yeah. Specifically, if you are wanting a good lightweight compact EDC that still feels like a full-size knife and is made in the USA, but you don't want to overpay for it, you don't want to feel like you're being taken for a ride, yeah, it's a winner. It's a winner, absolutely. Highly recommendable to essentially anyone. This is an any one knife. I feel like a lot of the stuff I review, I'm like, I can see how it's for this group of people, but not this group. This knife is for pretty much anybody. Doesn't really matter who you are. I think that this knife would bring you joy, and it would be very convenient and would make your life easier in terms of what a pocket knife can do for you day to day. So very cool, awesome gift for anyone. Just an awesome thing all the way. Kershaw continuing to just be an incredible company, which is cool because, as I've said many times, if you don't know, I kind of started all this with Kershaw. I started my own personal journey. The first knife that kind of caused me to come online, so to speak, and understand that there are differences, between a cheap pocket knife and a good pocket knife. The Kershaw Bel-Air was the first knife that allowed me to realize that. So it's pretty cool to still, be able to say that after, I guess that would have been 20 years ago, almost. Anyways, it's an awesome pocket knife. Highly recommendable. It'll go in my most recommended knives playlist. And that's going to be it for today. So thanks again to Kai USA. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.